Imagine this. One day, you wake up to find that something has changed. It's not that the sky is bluer, nor is the wind blowing with a different melody, it's you. Your bones feel as light as paper, yet they can bear more weight than ever before. Your muscles, which once seemed like mere threads compared to the world, now possess unimaginable power. You're not quite sure what has happened, but one fact is undeniable. You are a person, but with the proportional strength of an ant. And this leads us to a fascinating, almost poetic question. What would happen to the world, to humanity, and to the very essence of what it means to be human if we all, suddenly, carried within us the prodigious strength of such a small yet extraordinary creature? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're having an ordinary morning, sitting at the table, about to have your breakfast. The ceramic mug in your hand feels familiar, comfortable. But as you lift it, something strange happens. With a simple movement, you squeeze it hard enough to reduce it to shards. Water spills between your fingers and you don't understand what you just did. In a panic, you look at your hands and feel that they are different, more powerful, more dangerous. Now try to expand this feeling to everything around you. Doors shatter at your touch. The ground seems to tremble beneath your feet, and walls cannot withstand a careless brush of your arm. Welcome to your first day as a human with the proportional strength of an ant. But to understand what this means, we need to start with ants. Small creatures, often overlooked, yet extraordinary. A common ant can carry between 20 and 50 times its body weight. For us, that would be equivalent to lifting cars with a single hand or carrying trucks as if they were pieces of luggage. The explanation for this Herculean feat lies in physics, not magic. The smaller an animal, the greater the ratio between the strength of its muscles and the weight it carries. It's as if ants are little packets of pure energy designed to carry entire worlds. Yet this rule of nature doesn't work so generously for us humans. If we tried to replicate this power with our current structure, the result would be devastating. Our bones, designed to carry much smaller loads, wouldn't withstand the weight of our actions. Imagine a thin piece of wood trying to support a ton. That's what would happen to our skeleton. Our joints would turn to dust under the strain, and our tendons, even the strongest ones, would snap like old rubber bands pulled too hard. In other words, our bodies as we know them would be a walking contradiction. The strength of a titan in a shell too fragile to support it. But what if our bodies were magically adapted to handle this strength? What if we could maintain emotional fragility while also gaining the proportional strength of an ant? In this scenario, the impact wouldn't just be physical, but social as well. Imagine the daily implications. You leave for work, and with just a slightly stronger step, you crack the sidewalk beneath your feet. Pushing open the door of a supermarket could make the glass shatter as if it were made of fine ice. Every interaction, every movement would require such extreme control that we would be forced to completely retrain ourselves. Even a gesture of affection like holding the hand of someone you love could cause irreparable damage if the force wasn't carefully measured. Something as simple as a handshake would turn into a delicate choreography of care and self-control. Would you trust yourself not to hurt others? And then comes the inevitable question: would absolute strength be a blessing or a burden? Our human fragility, so feared, is also what connects us to the world. The simple fact that we are not invincible compels us to work together, to create machines, tools, and structures that amplify our strength in a collective and collaborative way. If we were all powerful individually, would we lose that need for unity? And more. What would it mean to be human in a world where strength has no limits, but empathy might become more fragile than ever? After all, lifting tons with our hands might be an impressive feat. But the true weight of existence, the one that defines us as a species, is not measured in physical strength. It's measured in our ability to carry the world on our shoulders together without breaking it. Now imagine for a moment that the impossible has happened. Somehow, all humans woke up with the proportional strength of an ant. It wasn't gradual, there was no warning. It was like turning on a light in a dark room. Overnight, the world changed. Cars were left abandoned on the streets because no one needs them anymore. Why wait in traffic when your legs can cover miles in minutes? Entire buildings are erected in days, perhaps hours, with human workers who, alone, lift steel beams as if they were raising an umbrella. But as the dust of this new reality begins to settle, something uncomfortable emerges. The world as we know it is not prepared for us. Cities, objects, and even daily interactions need to be completely reinvented. Think of the initial chaos. The streets would crack beneath our steps, elevators would become obsolete because climbing stairs or jumping to the top of a building would be more efficient. But along with practicality would come accidents. Doors would be ripped off their hinges with a careless tug, handrails crushed by hands that have yet to learn to measure their new strength. Imagine walking into a store and trying on a pair of glasses only to destroy them with your grip. Small, everyday gestures, which were once automatic, would now require a level of attention and superhuman control. How do you open a glass jar without shattering it? How do you type on a computer keyboard without smashing the keys? Even flipping through a book would become an act of extreme delicacy. And sports? The line between skill and destruction would be almost non-existent. Think of a simple game of soccer. A kick could send the ball flying out of the stadium, perhaps even to another city. Sprinting 100 meters? It would be won in the blink of an eye. The Olympics would become a surreal spectacle where records would be broken absurdly at each event, until they no longer mattered. When everyone is superpowered, what defines a champion? Perhaps technique, or maybe the ability to control strength. But would that be enough to maintain the fascination? Or would we see our favorite sports becoming irrelevant in a world where everyone is already extraordinary? But the implications go far beyond competitions. This new human strength would bring changes to interpersonal relationships. A simple handshake could be dangerous, and fights between siblings or friends would cease to be innocent disagreements and could turn potentially lethal. Intimacy, touch, would need to be reimagined. Hugging someone you love? You'd fear hurting them. Carrying a baby in your arms? Such a natural act would transform into a constant test of self-control and fear of making a mistake. To live in this new world, each of us would need to learn an unimaginable physical and emotional discipline. What was once instinctive would now need to be meticulously calculated. And then a new set of rules would need to emerge. A completely reinvented social code. Laws to regulate how we use this strength, to protect each other from our own impulses. Perhaps even a mandatory training system, something like specialized schools to teach humans how to live with their new bodies. We would be forced to slow down, to pay attention to every gesture, every movement, in an effort to prevent the power we now possess from destroying everything around us. But deep down, the question we cannot avoid is, would our humanity survive in such a world? When every gesture contains the potential to create or destroy, how would we maintain the balance between who we are and what we can become? Now pause and take a deep breath. We're not just talking about physical strength. This new world where every human possesses the proportional strength of an ant brings with it something much deeper, much more disturbing. How would it affect what we feel and how we relate to each other? For centuries, our humanity has been shaped by our limitations. It's our fragility that brings us closer, that makes us care for one another, that compels us to seek protection, comfort, and affection. But what if that fragility disappeared? What would be left of us? Would we still be able to love, trust, and connect in the same way when a simple show of affection could lead to destruction? Imagine the impact of this on our most intimate relationships. A warm embrace, that universal gesture of love and security, would now become a test of precision. Would you squeeze too hard? Would the person you love trust that they are safe in your arms? And what about fear? Fear of hurting or being hurt. How would we create emotional bonds in a world where touch, the most human thing we have, could become a potential weapon? Marriages, families, friendships. All these connections that are based on vulnerability and trust would need to be redefined. Would we, out of fear, start to distance ourselves from one another? And when we talk about emotions, the impact becomes even more fascinating and frightening. Anger, frustration, sadness. We are human, and our feelings sometimes explode in impulses that we cannot always control. Now imagine an explosion of anger in this new world. A disagreement that would have previously ended in harsh words or slammed doors could now destroy an entire house or seriously injure someone. Humanity would have to learn emotional control at a level that has never been necessary before. Every small misunderstanding would carry the weight of a potential tragedy. Would we be ready for that? Would we be capable of taming not only our physical strength, but also our most primitive impulses? But the impact goes beyond the individual. Our identity as a species would be transformed. Since the beginning of our existence, we have sought to surpass ourselves, to overcome the world around us, to achieve the impossible. It is our quest to push our own limits that makes us human. But what if those limits disappeared? What if there were no more physical barriers to overcome? How would we find purpose? Perhaps absolute strength would force us to seek other forms of evolution: emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual evolution. For the first time, we might be compelled to look inward for meaning rather than seeking it in the physical world. And finally, this leads us to a disquieting reflection. What defines us as humans? Is it our strength, our fragility, or something deeper, something we may not even know how to name? In this new world where we could lift mountains with our bare hands, the true challenge would be not to lose ourselves in the process. Would we be able to balance our power with our humanity? Or would we end up becoming something entirely different? After all, it is not brute strength that defines us, but how we choose to use it. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is what truly matters. Now imagine, the power is literally in your hands. You can lift a car with one arm, pull a tree out of the ground as if it were a flower, even smash a stone in half with a single punch. Sounds incredible, doesn't it? But here's the question that few consider. Absolute, limitless strength is also an invitation to chaos. Because just like in nature, the greater the power, the greater the impact. And in the case of humanity, the greater the destruction we can cause. The planet, which has always endured our constructions, our cities, and our inventions, would now have to deal with a new, colossal force, that of 8 billion superhumans. And it simply wouldn't be prepared for it. Let's start with the basics. Every step, every movement, every physical interaction would have unimaginable consequences. A simple jump could create holes in the ground, destabilizing structures around it. Careless steps could crack asphalt, sidewalks, and even the foundations of buildings. The accumulated impact of this new strength, repeated billions of times around the world, would turn our cities into ruins in a matter of days. And that's not even considering natural areas. Entire forests could be uprooted, not out of malice, but out of carelessness. Mountains could be fragmented to clear a path, rivers diverted by the simple movement of our hands. The delicate balance of nature, which took billions of years to form, would be shattered in an instant. But the destruction wouldn't stop there. The use of our new strength would generate unpredictable waves of impact. A human with the strength of an ant lifting tons of weight could create pressures in the ground that might trigger localized seismic tremors. Think about it. You lift something incredibly heavy, the ground gives way, and the vibrations spread like ripples in a pond. Multiply this by millions of people doing the same thing simultaneously, and we have artificial earthquakes devastating entire cities. The climate would also not escape unscathed. The forces we would apply to the Earth could interfere with natural cycles such as wind patterns, tides, and even the balance of tectonic plates. Unknowingly, we could become the architects of our planet's destruction. And of course, there's the question of war. With such power in everyone's hands, traditional weapons would become irrelevant. We wouldn't need bombs or tanks anymore. A single human with superhuman strength could devastate an entire city alone. Imagine what a conflict between nations would look like in this scenario. It wouldn't be a matter of technology, but of how many individuals each side could mobilize to cause mass destruction. The very concept of war would change, and with it the risk of extinction for civilization as we know it. In a world where everyone is a living weapon, how would we prevent that power from being used to destroy rather than create? And this leads us to an even deeper question. How much can the planet endure? Is there a limit to what the Earth can support? And that limit would certainly be exceeded with humans possessing the proportional strength of an ant? Perhaps the oceans would be the first to give way, undergoing drastic changes in the flow of currents. maybe the very core of the planet would feel the impacts of the strength unleashed by our species. But the most terrifying thing is that the destruction in this scenario wouldn't even be intentional. It would be accidental. Our everyday actions, our simplest movements, would accumulate such a massive impact that the very world would collapse. Absolute power, which seemed like a dream, would reveal itself as a curse. Not just for us, but for everything around us. Imagine that the chaos has already passed. Somehow the world has found a way to survive the colossal strength of every human being. Cities have been rebuilt with extremely resilient materials. Forests, soil, and even oceans have had to adapt to withstand the impact of our new bodies. But while humanity adjusts physically, something much deeper begins to change: our very identity. Who are we now that we no longer have physical limits? How do we find meaning in a world where nothing is impossible? For thousands of years, humanity has defined itself by its struggle against limitations. Every invention, every advancement, every victory has been driven by the desire to overcome what seemed insurmountable. It was gravity that took us to the moon. It was the weakness of our bodies that made us create machines to work in our place. It was the fear of the unknown that turned us into explorers and thinkers. But now, in this world of absolute strength, where are the limits? What is left for us to overcome? Without the impossible to challenge us, do we still have the motivation to grow, to evolve? Perhaps this absence of physical barriers would force us to look for another type of challenge: emotional, intellectual, spiritual. What if, instead of trying to conquer the external world, we finally turned our efforts toward understanding and conquering the internal world? In a universe where everyone has the power to move mountains, could true heroism lie in learning to control our impulses, to seek balance, to create deeper connections with others? Maybe the true challenge is no longer about what we can do, but about what we choose not to do. After all, absolute strength only becomes a virtue when used wisely. And perhaps this new humanity would find ways to redefine what it means to be human. Not by the capacity to build or destroy, but by the ability to create something that transcends the physical. Art, science, philosophy. Perhaps these would become the new frontiers of our existence. We would be forced to find meaning in things that cannot be crushed or lifted by our hands. Maybe, in this world where physical impossibilities no longer exist, we would finally learn that the true meaning of humanity lies not in the strength we possess, but in our care, our choices, and our capacity to imagine something greater than ourselves. A power that no force in the universe can replace. In the end, colossal strength would not be enough. It wouldn't be enough to protect us from ourselves. It wouldn't be enough to find purpose, nor to fill the void that exists in the human heart when it doesn't know what to do with so much power. Because the true strength, the one that truly defines us, is not the strength of our muscles, but the strength of our choices. Choices that allow us to love, to forgive, to build, and above all, to connect. And here lies the great irony. The more power we have, the more important what we cannot measure, touch, or destroy becomes: compassion, care, the courage to do what is right when no one is watching. Imagine a world where everyone is immensely strong, but incapable of controlling that strength. Where power is in the hands of each individual, but care and responsibility are set aside. It would be a world that crumbles upon itself, not from a lack of ability, but from a lack of balance. And perhaps this is the lesson we need to learn now. Not in a hypothetical future, but in the present, here and now. Because even without the strength of an ant, the world has already given us immense power. The power to shape our environment, our relationships, and our future. The power to build or destroy, to create or depress. The question has never been about how strong we are, but about how we use the strength we already have. So I ask you, are we using our power? The power of our words, our actions, our choices, to create something worthwhile? Are we, even without super strength, building a world where our limitations are not obstacles, but reminders that we need each other? Because in the end, the true legacy of humanity will never be measured in tons lifted or kilometers traveled. It will be measured by how much we can transform the world with simple gestures, but filled with meaning. Are we ready for this responsibility, even without the strength of an ant? Now it's your turn. What would you do if you woke up tomorrow with the proportional strength of an ant? How do you think the world would deal with this transformation? I really want to hear what you think. Share your ideas in the comments. And if you enjoyed this reflective journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We are just beginning to explore these incredible questions about humanity, the universe, and everything that makes us think. Let's imagine new worlds together, question possibilities, and perhaps become better versions of ourselves. After all, it's curiosity and the desire to learn that truly make us strong. I'll see you in the next video.